Okay, we are live here. Not taking calls at the moment because I'm mobile. I didn't realize my earbud is actually glowing. Thought it was police lights behind me. Unbelievable. More impressive than any of the UFO droppings they gave us. I think they had a few really bad bits of video footage like we predicted, and people have overreacted predictably. It's really quite an embarrassment. I don't know if they can recover. I mean, seriously, the hype just overstated it. There's no reason to walk away saying that religions have been threatened by this unveiling of something huge and significant because nothing happened. Apparently, Apollo 17 astronauts have some photos with some blurs in the background. So I'm saying, wait, we're going 50 years into the past, like we're not even bringing up new stuff. No. And I'm wondering what gives here. Like, are they not confident in their ability to pull off Project Bluebeam? Yeah, I saw that, Till, the hantavirus mentioned in the X-Files. I find it unbelievable. I really do, but we can't ignore the theme here. And I was wondering if there's some kind of connection between the mice and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where the world ends and you find out like the mice are actually extremely intelligent and they're watching us. They were studying us the whole time. Yeah, I'm trying to decide if I want to go set up the phones or not. I don't know. I don't want to burn everyone out. It's been, we were live this morning for 2.5 hours, but a lot did come up that I could discuss. Maybe we should. It's a Friday night. We'll probably hear some more gunshots. Now, whatever happened the other night, nobody called the cops, and they haven't found the bodies yet. I mean, I haven't seen any follow up. Yeah, stream all day. Who cares? Yeah, that's kind of my take on it. No, it's been a very productive few days, and I have a few more days before I get busy again. And even that, I'm not going to be at the same workload I was before. There's quite a lot to talk about. The Morgau wrote a love letter to Candace Owens, and I'm just like, where was this guy? He was out of the loop, and he's just now coming across the Charlie Kirk thing, and he's on team Candace Owens, which is a weird place to start because Tyler Robinson is going to be on court TV. They're televising it. So if he's up there saying, "Yeah, I shot him," that's going to fly in the face of, "Oh, I thought Erica shot him," or "I thought Netanyahu shot him." No, it was this guy. So then, what's the last recourse? Oh, he's a mind-controlled assassin, Patsy. So it's going to be problematic. But from what I imagine, like I said before, actually I called this. I said we're going to get some radar with a blip on it, and that's exactly what we got. Exactly, we got 1980s Atari graphics. Actually, Atari graphics were better than what we just got. But I'm wondering here, what is the objective? Is it just hype? And so I came up with this term today, distraction-tainment. Is this just a nonstop distraction operation that reinforces certain aspects of the world stage? Like, let's keep the atheists superstitious and promote the notion that aliens are a scientific proposition, while demons are not. And then simultaneously, it brought demons to the table. So now we're hanging out with aliens and demons, like these things exist. And then we have a sitting congresswoman talking about, quote, interdimensional. Where are the scientists pushing back? Like, where are the scientists saying, excuse me, Representative Luna, like lunatic, that's not a joke. They set it up this way. That's a world stage name. That's a character as silly as MTG and Lauren Boebert saying some silly stuff with the name like Luna. And she got her start showing her posterior wearing a MAGA bikini, like mooning us. Like there's something to it, I believe. But I'm just saying, this Rep Luna character is talking about interdimensionals like that has any significant definition, like in this context. Like, it's a science fiction concept. So they cart this person out to overhype this thing, and we get what? A lot of celebrities, in fact, were out talking about aliens, and they talk about it almost in the way that people would describe religious experiences. They're always kind of almost reverent about it. And I think it's a ludicrous proposition anyway. When you talk about if you really get into the idea of visitors from far away, it's obviously ridiculous. There's better things. I mean, there are better explanations for what it could be, but the storyline they've given us about the Project Bluebeam thing, I'm starting to wonder if they're just afraid to try to do it. Plain decoded says, I'm seeing on my socials about UFO from the White House WarGov UFO. It's a government website. The government is dropping these files, and I'm just saying they're not all that impressive. And I saw something saying the Roswell crash was hexagonal and had a balloon attached. It's like, what do you think? I mean, what do you think it is if it's got a balloon? You can't have a balloon from space. And then we have like an admission from the Pentagon where they had said that Area 51 stories regarding UFOs were fictions disseminated by the Pentagon. And this is just like Mirage Men, where they say that many of the stories about abductions, etc., came from the Air Force. But it's just amazing how they get people involved in this like do your own research thing. Like, hey, we're going to give you the files. It's like, why don't you just present us with your best evidence in a press conference? No, we're just gonna do a data dump and let you sort through it. And I made some fake stuff up, other people have, and I'm not getting a million hits for mine, but just so you know, the Apollo 17 photo of the black cube floating on the moon, yeah, I made that with Grok. It's not real. I mean, I hope I didn't fool anybody. I should have done some kind of a squid thing, like, or maybe a T-Rex skull. Conventional science does say that it's probable that there are dinosaur bones on the moon. By the way, the idea of the moon being an alien base is not new, and some of those theories seem somewhat plausible. The Moonfall movie addressed this, that it's a foreign body that was moved into place. David Icke talks about this as well. I like the Saturn moon matrix concept. I don't hear so much about that anymore, but the idea that the moon is some kind of soul harvesting machine, soul recycler. It's pretty bizarre. The idea is that life comes down from the sun and it gets harvested by the moon and gets reincarnated endlessly or something. And the whole thing is this projection from Saturn. Have you heard of this Saturn moon matrix thing? Plain Dakota says, are you going to go on kick and start becoming a provocateur? Well, I'm certainly not going to shoot dead alligators and hammer smash my face. I'm not going to pretend like yelling racial slurs is a crusade for free speech. God, that Chud guy is so stupid. His whole rationale is ridiculous. He's got to be a Fed. Nobody walks around brandishing a weapon and then chasing people down and macing them. I mean, it doesn't make sense. I think the guy's a Fed. And what's the agenda? Probably to demonize live streamers getting monetized for doing extreme things. Perhaps even Clavicles belongs in the same category. He's doing meth to stay slim, reckless with guns. I think he even overdosed on camera last week, which is, I mean, and these could all be fake. These could be PR stunts, but they're doing it for money. And of course, associating with Nick Fuentes, even though they have nothing in common, the traditional values, America first versus the looks maxers, but the association does create this other element as well. If you remember, Clavicles and Andrew Tate were in a nightclub in Miami chanting some Yay song, with some Nazi slogans in it. So you have this obvious collection, I think, of people who are just saboteurs. I mean, I guess there's a lot of money in some of these dumb things, but I wouldn't really ever engage in that kind of thing, those kinds of antics. I don't think there's any sort of scalability or long-term prospects for it. I think a better process is just to engage rationally with people. Like even the debate setups you see with like Charlie Kirk and other types, or more recent like Alex Stain, where they sit there and they debate like college freshmen. That's a form of provocateuring. And I don't even think that those things are intellectually honest or even helpful. I think it's just a way to create clickbait content. And I don't know how much I put into these contrived situations. I'm either looking at a raccoon, a pit bull, or a chupacabra. I know it's dark. What the fuck is that? Okay, yeah, it's a dog. All right. Sorry, distraction. There's these dogs that run amok around here. And by the way, I sort of capitulated to the cat. I couldn't help it. I saw these little canned foods, these little friskies or something, and I picked up a couple. And she knew what it was when I pulled it out of the backpack. And then she shows up later, and it's just like, okay, she thinks we're friends now. And I shouldn't be doing that. I mean, I don't know this cat. It's a stray. It's like a neighborhood cat. I have no plans on adopting. Having an animal is kind of a burden, a drag, and a problem if you're not like in your settled down somewhere. Yeah, I'm not interested in interacting with normies, playing Decoded. Like, they don't care. They're not aware. They're blissfully unaware, and they don't want to be lectured to by someone they're going to perceive to be a proselytizer. I'm not even interested in like rigorous debate or friction about this thing. I'm more interested in the separation. This is a separatist thing. So what I mean is, I'd rather get the 80% deprogrammed, mostly up to speed people on board network, and then have our own separate ecosystem of content creators who are doing the great deconstruction. But that doesn't involve bouncing ideas off of people who are not interested in hearing about it. Like the idea of debating people on a college campus. Like, no, I'm not trying to paradigm shock people. I think people are, rage bait marketing, for example. Rage bait marketing and rage bait was like the word of the year last year. It's very popular, and especially we saw it in the last few years. I think almost like get to an absurd level, and if you'll see what I mean if you look up what rage bait marketing refers to. But I'm not really looking for that. Not my approach. Don't we want to get the level-headed people who aren't freaked out, who don't need to be converted? Because if you have to drag somebody kicking and screaming to your side, they're not really on your side. Because this isn't an alternative belief system. This is a different way to approach media consumption. It's a philosophical difference. So it's not really like a different set of orthodoxies. And I don't know about trying to float this around people who don't care. Nor do I care to make it intelligible to people who aren't caught up. And the truther community, the content creators who are still stuck in that whole mindset, they understand psyops, but the metascript concept is still being overlooked. And I think it might be because they're attached to various issues. You really do have to detach. And it might be hard for someone to say to themselves, I'm never going to vote again because the whole system's rigged, because it sounds like pessimistic or something. And that's not really what I'm saying, but it's true. But I mean, I don't think it's the result of pessimism. I think I'm just a realist. The fact that these major world changing events are scheduled far in advance, that they're so intricate that it involves so many interlocking agencies, and that it's just routine that our worldview is being manufactured. That fact pretty much assumes everything about the big world stage politics is theater. That doesn't mean local politics are the same. We're talking about a small subset of our realities, just the things that they focus on, the fake events, the fake people. Nobody here is saying everything's fake. But I am saying that, yeah, the whole thing's, to me, if you're still trying to win by supporting world stage or politicians, you have to remember that their point of view assumes and includes the concept that everything before was real. Like they're not coming from the same place. They can't. And it's not that they're compromised or insulated or unaware, it's that they're complicit in it. When the QAnon movement was happening, the QAnons worship Trump. And I would say, he's playing along with all the fake events. And they would say to me, oh, but he knows. He knows. He's just playing along because they'll use the 25th Amendment and get rid of him otherwise. So they had this explanation for why Trump was playing along. And I was like, well, how do you know? Well, at the Trump rallies, he draws a Q in the air and he winks. So I'm like, wait, what? So he knows, but he can't tell us. And they would consistently comfort themselves with these things where they're coping with the fact that he wasn't really their leader who's going to defeat the deep state, but that he's just going with the program. But they had that excuse. January 6th, they were like, oh no, it was a honeypot. January 6th, it was actually the deep state and the feds, and they set him up. It wasn't going to go wild like that. So he was what? A victim. He didn't actually cause it. But now that we have Butler, Pennsylvania, you lose that explanation. You lose that as an excuse. Butler, Pennsylvania, as a PSYOP, would necessarily have required his full complicity because he participated in it. He was the central figure. He was the magician in that show. So from that point on, all the people who had hope that Trump was actually playing 5D chess, they really have nothing to cling on to. So then we call into question these things like, well, the event itself was clearly planned in advance. We can pretty much say that one had at least 15 years in the planning. I mean, I don't know how far back, but that's as far as we've looked. Although, if we look at the predictive programming for the Trump character, we could push it back even further, maybe even 2001. But anyway, no, I'm thinking, well, I'll have to go back and look, but I'm pretty sure we have a list of movies that have these predictions for Trump, essentially, these what we call predictive programming. But if that was planned that far in advance, then there was no chance he wasn't going to be elected because these things are connected. We're talking about contrived historic events and they're presented to us through the news media, but there's a collusion and an entrainment between the news media and the mass entertainment. And these fake events are all attended by a lot of propaganda support in the form of entertainment. And this is not a anomalous thing. This is a feature. It's a feature of the system and it's predictable. Even, the day before, what, let me think, it was September. No, actually on the day of the Charlie Kirk thing, I said, if it's fake, and note, I didn't say it's fake. I said, if it's fake, some of the hoax indicators that we're going to come across are going to be things like predictive and concurrent programming. So then the next day I find out about Tempest, which came out on that day. So, in other words, between Tempest and half a dozen others we could mention, we in fact predicted that it would be attended by predictive programming. So it's formulaic. And we've been doing this long enough that like our minds aren't blown by the coincidences. People see these coincidences like snake eyes, and they're like, my mind's blown. The fabric of reality is torn. We're in a simulation. It's like, yeah, you guys are. Speak for yourselves. Ollie Goering says Trump secretly loves you. He drew a Q and winks at nonners. Yeah, it's actually called erotomania. What's up, Mazel? Thanks for joining. Erotomania is when somebody believes, or an entire group of people believe, that a celebrity or a politician or someone at a distance secretly loves them. Like it's not open, but they can they can wink at you on TV. And it's like it's a mental illness thing. It's an obsession thing where people read into things and it's, cognitive bias, whatever it is. I think the guy that shot Reagan, John Hinckley Jr., had erotomania for Jodie Foster. I probably had, yeah, now think about it. There's a list of people I would consider to be erotomaniacs. A lot of stalkers fall in that category. It's a delusion thing. And that was a massive collective delusion. But was he feeding it by drawing the cues? I think so. That's what's even crazier about this is that they created the Q cult. The Q cult wasn't spontaneous, wasn't grassroots. No, it came out of the White House, and that has never really been fully examined by mainstream sources. They've ignored this information. They've ignored that somebody in the White House press corps was one of the main propagandists behind the Q psyop. Like, how do you just ignore something like that? Joe from Connecticut says, I question my local government. The mayor was accused of cheating at his last election via ballots, and it was 33 years since he first got elected. Suzette says, the trackdown episode of Trump. Oh, yes. Trump ended the world 1958, predicted the arrest 63 years before. Build the wall, cosmic threats, con man Trump. I mean, and you can connect End of the World both to Donnie Darko, and you can even connect that episode to Quantum Leap, which involves, like Darko, time travel, which is a feature of Back to the Future with Biff Tannen, who's also Trump. But yeah, there's quite a lot to unpack there when you get into the Trump predictive programming. And so when I'm saying that elections don't matter or that you don't control these things, that's what I'm talking about. Our history is written into the future. So you can recognize psyops, big deal. You can call things fake. Okay, that's obvious. But when you look at these things in the context of news bending and history bending, you can extrapolate from the structure of media itself what it does when it comes to the manufacturing of fake events. And by looking at the predictive stuff, you can determine how long in advance a specific fake event was being planned, that it was on the program. And the buildup begins in the predictive content. But if you're talking big events 10, 20, 30 years in advance, then yeah, these are not random elections that anybody could win. Oh, so the Trump predictive programming character in Trackdown is a pretty good example of how it encompasses multiple aspects of him. Being called a con man, the cosmic threat, Space Force, the whole build the wall thing, and then getting arrested. Yeah, that's all Trump stuff. And this was noted in 2016 by CNN. Like, oh, 58 years ago, this predicted Trump. And that was before Trump got arrested. So the entire prophecy had not come true yet. But there's some common attributes to every one of these with Trump that I find intriguing because you go to Back to the Future. Well, you got the time travel thing. You have the casino. There's quite a lot there with the similarities, but you also have 9/11 predictive programming. It's like, wait, 9/11 and time travel. Then you go to Donnie Darko, 9/11 stuff and time travel, plus the head wound. And you go on and on with these various movies. You have Dennis Hopper, King Koopa in the Mario Brothers movie, based on Trump, and they melt the Twin Towers. So there's Francis Ford Coppola's movie, which is supposed to be pre 9/11, but recently came out, has a Trump character. Caesar Catalina, New York gets 9/11 and head wound, just like the one. I mean, this is like kind of a scratching the surface, an overview of the common denominators that you'll find connecting the predictive programming counterparts to a world stage character. And this is huge in and of itself because it shows that not only does predictive programming exist, and you could say, oh, this is just random or cherry picking. Well, no, because in every instance, they contain the same common elements, which suggests a little more than just random overlaps. But we're past the point of arguing with the coincidence theorists because their argument stems from not having examined the evidence. And the frame of reference that we're working with at this time is 1960 to the present. Like I'm just looking at maybe the last 75 years, we'll go that far. But what I'm just trying to establish here is the template, the pattern, the collusions in terms of entertainment and government. And then, of course, I want to examine and map out the various directors, the meta scripters. But I want to show that there's a pattern at work here that has been established for a long time and is in continuous operation. And that what we have demonstrated, I think, effectively here is that we're living in a alternate reality game because our history is proactively created, and this creates a one world, I guess, consensus agreement on how things are. We have our shared fake history. Every fake event they insert gets downloaded into everyone's minds simultaneously. I mean, yesterday we touched on just what a great victory 2020 was for the system, where we've been globally crate trained. And by crate training, I'm just referring to, like, the dog's given a command and it runs into its crate and locks itself up. And that's kind of how we are programmed now. And it's all through this mass media that's turned us into this hive mind. And we were talking about the bee stuff because someone mentioned Begonia on Netflix and the hive mind stuff in Pluribus. And recently, there was some bee stuff with the First Lady and Trump. Even Trump was holding a bee. I mean, what the hell is that? The cat is adopting you. I think she's too wild. I mean, that cat has been out in the wild for its entire life. I don't know if it can be completely tamed. Although, like today, I attempted, I had a strap from a backpack and I attempted to get her to, basically grab it out of my hands or, you play with the cat. And I was trying to see if I can get her to take an interest in a toy, like a cat toy. And she seemed to respond to it. She followed it and she was very curious, but she didn't get too close to me. Like there's still, but although the other day, and I think they're just marking the territory. When I was live streaming, she did lean on my calf, so I think, okay, maybe I'm being marked. But it's a very smart creature to do this full assessment, spine for a long time, and then gradually came to trust me. And even now, there's this hesitancy, and I recognize that it prefers to eat out in the open. It's not comfortable if I'm like within like 4 feet away. So I don't know what their backgrounds are 100%. I just know that they grew up in some cat lady's place and she died. I don't know if they ate her corpse. Probably not. That has happened though. I've read stories about that. All right, let's see here. We were talking about the Oh, so yeah, we were talking about the meta script and the fact that our future is written in advance. So I would describe the meta script, the program, as all of the fake news cycles that they throw into the mix. So every day you have some level of fakery just thrown in there. And these various psyops, they take various forms, but I'm talking about the ones that become part of our officially recognized history. And these ones are differentiated by the public's response to them. One of my axioms has been fake events and fake people are always presented in such a way that the two sides, the two factions, agree the thing is real, but they fight over whose fault it is. So that's one of the ways you can tell the fake event is or event is likely staged or fake is that it has a certain way of provoking the two sides in a way that gets certain levels of agreement about things, but then gets them embroiled in the story until the next big thing happens. And the process of fighting over it is what makes it real. The debate, the blame shifting, the scapegoating. Yeah, that's all just immersing people in it. And so like the Loosh extraction game is just getting your emotional investment. Someone is asking, how do they monetize your Loosh? What are they doing with it? Because I know that there's this attention economy where your every microsecond of attention is targeted with some kind of agenda. And I think ultimately it's about getting you to invest in this belief system. So that's why I said I'm not a Loosh cow. I believe in Loosh retention. Like you shouldn't be emoting to something on the screen, given what you know about it and its past precedent of lying and faking and manipulation. If you have the level of awareness that includes 60 years of fake events and manipulation, then you should know better than to emotionally cave to every story or any story at all. So the decoupling of your emotions from the propaganda um, is the first step, I think, to becoming truly skeptical. Because there are no skeptics in world stage media. There's only this one-sided incredulity against the other side. Oh, everything they do is fake. Everything they do is a conspiracy theory. They each have this. They have this mutual like incredulity about each other's content, where it's just automatically. And the automatic part's the problem. You shouldn't be automatically processing the stuff because that's how they get you. What's up, Pippi Langstruff? Thanks for joining. Joined by Portal. So I'm working on a new project here. We used to have a 24-hour audio only stream, and I have a plan to bring that back. And the plan is to convert the conspiratainment radio into something, but I want to label it a little bit different. And I'll probably put this in the newsletter. But if our objective here is to have a self defined demographic of media observers, in other words, the off world stage, then there has to be some level of networking. And it can't just be everybody's in the same Discord, but there has to be networking in terms of uh, cross marketing and then pulling together or networking content. So, for example, the Dark Matter Network was a bunch of paranormal podcasts on a 24-hour loop. And I'm thinking we need to have some kind of a network, and it might start off small, but I can bring people in, whether it's podcasters or just as guests. But the idea here is sort of an off-world stage radio, sort of a platform for only that content that fits that description. I mean, I have everything I need to put that together. I just was considering I got to make use of this 24-hour stream, but I want to also have a place where I can uh, archive interviews and possibly put a lot of our voice chat or phone call content, but the voice chat stuff as well. Because when I had that thing in operation, it was getting decent traffic, and I think I need to bring that back. Lord Laney says, it's not about the monetization, it's about keeping your focus, like strapping your eyes open on a Clockwork Orange style. That's why their symbol is the eye. Right. Well, that's kind of an interesting question, point you raise here. Like, is it really about the money? Do they really want your money? No, they want your attention, and attention is currency. And I think your attention is, at this point, being fought over like a precious resource, and it really is. So you have this massive demographic of propagandized lemmings on both sides who are essentially loosh cows. They're being harvested. You know, in Gnosticism, there's this term, I think it's called, is it harvest of the, I'll have to find it. I found this interesting phrase, but yeah, there's this harvesting aspect to it. Plain Dakota says you need to make short oh yes, absolutely. You know, actually the clips for this podcast are auto-manufactured by they're automatically created on Substack and Patreon. So as I start archiving stuff, I'm gonna have more and more clips, and then those are being distributed through my video clippers, the video clipping team. And I was thinking too that I'm gonna have to come up with a strategy here to get these clips distributed that's not just based on 1,000 views, because we're kind of niche. But I have some other ideas that might still be, lucrative for video clippers, but doesn't involve the reliance on having a built-in big audience. But it's not that we're reaching out for these short attention span audiences out there. We're going into their territory to reach the people who are, fishing for longer form or who do both. But ignoring the short form is really not survivable. It's not a long-term success strategy. A lot of these fake people that get inflated that you see that you can't avoid. You're like, why am I looking at this hammer smash guy, the smasher face guy? Sorry, look smashers. Like you would never have come across that before. Well, these people are paying legions of video clippers. I mean, it's a good strategy. We've tried it before, but we're bringing that back. Our Cook 33 says short clips are good, less ads. Yeah, I have a few ideas to make it work, but I think that again, the whole point of it is we want to start consolidating this idea. These other content creators or podcasters who are situationally aware. Because as I was saying earlier, I'm not trying to reach normies and bombard them with facts they don't care about. My objective here is to find the people who've figured it out and then figure it out even better, but also separate from those who have not. And the point of separating is that it's obviously at this point the case that the entirety of alt media is in fact establishment controlled. Like there's no conspiracy theory out there that's valid because all of them are subplots within the meta script. They're all attached to the sequence of fake events. So, I mean, if you can find a conspiracy theory that's popular that isn't rooted in the fake stuff, let me know. Like the second shooter things. Well, I'm sorry, but every second shooter conspiracy theory, no matter where it ends up pointing the blame, is predicated on the fact that the assassinations were real. Plain says, yeah, wag your finger. Yeah, again, my point here though is because people have said, well, be more marketable, break it down, be simpler. I used to get people trying to moderate me all the time. They would say, don't say nobody died, or don't be so certain, use the Socratic method. I've had a lot of people over the years try to say, maybe you should tone it down for the people that have no clue. Like, what are you talking about? The people that have no clue hate us. So we're not trying to rescue hostages of the mind war because they're all traitors at this point, like to their own interests, to their own perceptions. I'm sorry, they're self-betrayers. It's self-betrayal, is what I mean. And they're not like hostages that we're trying to save. They're not heathens we're trying to convert. They're the enemies in the ideological warfare. They're the opponents. Like they're not on your team. And the sooner you understand that, the better. It doesn't mean you're antagonistic or you don't like them or you're argumentative. It just means you recognize that they exist on the other side of the black mirror and that they're not going to defect. They're not swayable. They're not convertible. They're settled. And the reason why they're settled is that their worlds make sense. It's not like people are experiencing any serious, like, cognitive dissonance watching the nightly news because it's all reinforcing their worldview. Like, we're kind of fringe because we went into the mainstream approved alternative universe of ideas and then found out that was fake. Mazel says people's attention spans are short. That's why they recommend it. I'm curious if that's true. I mean, if so, I mean, it's a horrible thought to think that people are having their attention spans artificially shortened. I'd like to think it's not true, but then it's like there's never any closure. Where's the closure for Epstein or P. Diddy? Like, it's like, you binge watch a show on Netflix. You would never stop 3/4 or 9/10 of the way through a series. But I feel like every major psyop stops before it's done. They move on to the next thing. Can we arrest normies for their crimes? We're talking about the arena of ideas. So you have to recognize you have opponents. And a lot of people have problems with, like, oh, I don't take sides. Well, that's really not a choice. I mean, because you're already forced into one or the other the instant you have an opinion. Unless you have no opinions, which is, it's fine, it's viable. You can be completely ignorant of this stuff. It's not going to make your life any worse. It'll probably improve your life. I mean, I was doing just fine, not caring about it. And then I cared about it, and now I don't care about it. The difference is now I don't care about it, but I study it because I find it intriguing and interesting. And this is also a something of a philosophical question that we're delving into, and it raises a lot of interesting questions, and we're getting a lot of answers. And what we're looking at here is so big that the conspiracy theorists and the normies can't see it. It's bigger than their world stage. It includes too many things that they don't consider as relevant or interesting. But again, I'm not interested in formatting things to reach the people who are on the other side. There's absolutely no reason to do so. It's actually kind of like I think the people who suggest that stuff, and I've had to debate people in Discord, or we talked about stuff in Discord, like why we don't wake the normies. And the long and short of it, though, is that it's a free will thing, for one. But the other part of it is this is something that requires independent thinking. It's not a belief system. They kind of have to figure it out for themselves. And then also, of course, I think it stems from this notion that you have to wake people up, like the woke thing, wokeism. Wokeism is also a form of alarmism. Like, I'm awake to the oppressor, and you guys are asleep. So let me wake you up so we can all be awake. And the red pill thing was all about being awake and red pilling people, waking people up. That sounds like converting people, but it's a spiritual thing, or rather, it's a religious thing. Trutherism has become a religion. Like, think about it this way: if you can agree with me that mainstream mediation has supplanted religion, then why wouldn't the truther side of it also be a part of that? Mazel says, I'm not about waking anyone up, nor do I recommend people waste their time on it. Yeah, you have to be considerate of points of view, or at least cognizant of it, because it's futile to come with a perspective into a person's into a conversation with someone about an issue where their perspective doesn't include a lot of the stuff you're aware of. It's situational awareness. And you can't just give it to someone. If they don't have it, they don't have it. It's like this is not going to make sense to you. Like, I'm not trying to convince people of any of this stuff because I'm aware of where they're coming from. It's like, no, I'm not going to tell someone that I barely know, or maybe even a family member. I'm not going to try to convince them, oh, the news you've been consuming for the last, decades of your life. Yeah, it's complete propaganda. And so many people got so locked in with the MAGA cult that they can never back out. And I don't think there's any waking up of the, mainstreams. Vip John says it's a waste of time. You can plant seeds, but for the most part, they don't want to hear it as to all the fakery. No, and that's funny to me is that they don't want to hear it because they're like, you say fake and they just tune out. Like they don't want to hear about it. Like, it's like, we're saying there's fraud being committed by government and media. They're propagandizing you and they just tune it out. They don't want to hear it. They've been conditioned. But it's actually good news. You're like, "Oh, that bad thing that happened? Yeah, it's fake." Like, "No, it's real. No, it's fake." It's like, "How dare you, the victims." So they try to make it look like you've got the moral low ground. You really went low by saying that these victims were fake. You re-victimize them. In fact, you calling them fake is actually worse than than the killer who actually shot them. You're worse than the shooter for saying that the dead kids' lives are not real or were never real, that they were just fake dead kids. Like people really take it that way. And so now at this point, you can kind of turn tables and say, no, to the truth. The truth of it is, we have the moral high ground because we're not participating in the psychological warfare, which is definitely traumatic and disturbing and meant to control minds. Riley says, waking up normies is a road of sadness and disappointment. Look, I'll be honest, I feel fine just communicating at people at wherever they're at. It's like I can be a normie. I can be open-minded about conspiracies in public is what I'm saying. In real life, this is different though. This is the internet. The internet's not real life. We come on here and we can freely debate, cajole, engage in, I would say, open ideological warfare and whatever. Yeah, it's to me this it's open season. If you opine on social media, there's no reason that we shouldn't, feel that it's okay to respond. People put themselves out there. But in real life, no, I don't think it's a good idea. Vip John says, and we're on the higher ground. Yeah, so we have the intellectual high ground because we're skeptics. And skepticism is the primary thing here. So we're not conspiracy theorists, we're skeptics. There's a big difference. And the conspiracy theorists are not skeptics. They're alt programmed. And I expose this every time. And I hate to rip on the chemtrail crowd, but that's not a skeptical position because by definition, the skeptic would have looked at both sides. They would have looked at the evidence for each side and then made their determination that their explanation makes more sense. But the lack of predictability on their end kind of ruins that. And a lot of them don't want to confront this. Instead of recognizing that logically, the only conclusion that they can adhere to now is that they don't exist because they're not predictable and the contrails are, they just don't address this. So unfortunately, a lot of people are hiding behind like little shields of ignorance on these things, pretending like they can just ignore the reality here or it doesn't matter or minimize it. But if you're going to minimize the clues or the facts that would undermine what you're declaring to be true, then you're essentially lying. You're basically doing what you accuse the mainstream of doing. And truthers are a lot of times, especially now on X, they're more about entertainment than truth. They're truth entertainers. Vip John says, by calling yourself a conspiracy theorist, you're fitting in the box they made for you to join the other NPCs. Yeah, the alt NPCs. Well, I've gone after conspiracy theories for a reason because I used to think, and I understand their thinking on this thing too. Like you look at these conspiracy theories as better explanations. So lying media, and then you have the truth here. But over time, these various things which reinforce your perspective, these things are orthodoxies. They're just taken for granted. And when you challenge these things, people get a little shaken up by it. They don't like to hear it. But like the reason for believing them is what? These are just tribal orthodoxies. The alt media gets these alt stories to believe, and they become part of somebody's identity. That's why I'm saying alt media is a religion. I've been saying for a long time that mainstream media is a de facto religion by every definition, but alternative media is the same. And it's becoming very clear to me now. It even has eschatology built into it that would explain a lot of the Gnostic stuff. Now that I think about it, alt media being a religion is something we might want to highlight. And the reason why is that there's this revulsion people have towards cults, and they recognize, oh, QAnon's a cult. But it's like, well, you're an anti-vaxxer and a J pillar. How do you know that's not a cult? And I'm starting to say here that the entirety of alternative media could be classifiable as a cult. And we could use this as a viable shame tactic to disabuse people of their their beliefs in all of these various orthodoxies that we're finding to be, problematic, keeping them in their system. Like nobody wants to be exposed as being a cult member. And do you remember what they did to us at the very beginning? Do you remember how this channel was called a cult by a lot of our, I guess, by a lot of adjacent content creators? They were referring to us as a cult. Me and One Eye Jack were talking about this earlier. They're like calling my subscribers minions. And so we went with the whole Penguinati and the cult thing. I'm like, yeah, let them call us a cult. We'll just run with that. And so we did. But it was meant to outgroup us. It was meant to make us look bad. My point of it is, it's a pejorative. And if it's true, it's even worse. And is this a cult? No, it's a think tank. There's a big difference. And if you stretch the definition of the word too much, it doesn't mean anything. When people say cult, what they actually mean are dangerous cults or coercive cults. The word itself is just kind of bereft of meaning. You have to have some standard or it's just too vague. Because we could say, well, it is a cult because it's like a subculture. Well, no, it's not a cult in the sense that people use the word. A lot of this stuff does come down to language and the phrases that we're told to use have to be examined very closely. And that's actually a big part, I think, of philosophy in general, because there's implied meanings, behind the words that we use and the phrases we use. And one of the things we've done with this think tank is we've cleaned up our language. For example, nobody around here says false flag. If you say false flag, it's like, okay, you just signed off on alternative media interpretations to the event, which will assume that the mainstream is basically telling the truth, but you're just going to blame somebody else. So it's an alternative spin. It's just a spin. The conspiracies are just a spin off the mainstream, or what I call them a subplot. So these conspiracy theories are technically subplots because they're not exactly things made up out of whole cloth, but they're the result of breadcrumbed clues. Like if you look at the conspiracies about Erica Kirk, which are very popular now with Candace Owens and stuff, uh, that's not some organic movement of people that arrived at this conclusion that she's some sort of honeypot sent by intelligence agencies to take down TPUSA. No, that story is engineered and it was meant for them to find. And then they help, in their as they're processing it, they create this narrative, but it's just incredible to watch because the conspiracy theorists are easily led. They're easily led and they love these stories. And I talk about how the meta script or manufactured history is just an amalgamation of stories. And if you look at it in that perspective, yeah, you can see that people are getting caught up in the stories. And there's this, it's like the narratives trump facts. And the stories that they are sharing here are basically soap opera or sci opera is what we call it. But anyway, my point of it here is that these interactions with these events, these like these visceral reactions that people have make these things real. There are so many accounts doing parodies of Erica Kirk and remixes of her. You think she hates that? No, she's an actress, and this is a stunt. This is a staged historic event, and she plays a role in it. And everybody emoting and reacting and sharing content about her are solidifying the existence of her as such. This ridiculous character that should be derided. This honeypot slash whatever this way that she's been characterized, she's been turned into a villain. Well, okay, now if this villain exists, then fill in the blank. Well, then Charlie Kirk's dead. Then he was assassinated. Then she knew, and it actually underscores all of the theories on the woke right regarding how he was going to turn down money from Israel and that he wasn't for war with Iran. So Israel killed him. So you see, even the random people participating help reinforce the big story. And of course, these stories are all scripted. So we're living in a scripted reality. But I came up with the term meta script in this context because this is a script that this meta script is actually a sequence of scripts or scenes or events over the course of many, many years. But the meta script exists, as in the long-term planning of these events reveals this to be true. But yes, it exists as in there is in fact a program of scheduled fake events, and it probably extends 30 years into the future. And the present day mainstream entertainment is conditioning you for these eventualities. They're softening you up, preparing you, sowing the seeds, establishing archetypes in your mind. They're basically setting you up to be receptive to this false world that they're going to be presenting you on your nightly news in the future. But yes, the metascript thing existing is really the main thing that I think the people who are tired of the controlled op conspiratainment, it's the main thing they need to grasp. Once they accept it, because it exists. It's not a hypothetical. We can support the claim it exists with our reference to the bodies of predictive and concurrent stuff with the overlapping common denominator suggesting an origin point you can point to. That right there, the idea that these things are planned so far in advance, this is something that I think is one of the more important things to grasp, and it will turn people off of alt media. It's just difficult to convey the immensity of the deception because this takes it out of just American media and it puts it in the hands of some unknown, something global. But I'm very comfortable saying there's a big G global government. But I don't think it's sinister or nefarious, but I think that it's kind of outside the scope of the normal conspiracy theory. Where, I mean, even if you go, into like Red Pill and Alex Jones and stuff, you still think you're fighting for or you're part of America, a nation, and this type of government. Like the values that you have at least seem to be defended at this point. And I'm like, well, I don't know anymore. Like, are countries as real as we think they are, or are these useful fictions in part of a global system that has the appearance of the divisions because it's necessary in order to keep us distracted, entertained, and on the same sheet. It's Orwellian. War is peace. And global mind war is therefore a thing. So that's another thing too. When I said that they crate trained 8 billion people, that's real power. To me, power is not just blowing stuff up, but the idea that they pulled that off. We're talking about the most successful psyop that we'll ever probably live through. Ryler says the aliens will tell us our history is real and only that they were behind the scenes, and they'll confirm the mainstream narrative. Right. Yeah, just like AI. AI confirms the mainstream narrative. How convenient. So when we get into this, as we move into this off-world stage, and it completely separates, the people in it will get this. That what we're essentially doing here is we're separating on the basis of what you're describing here, perspective. So like the AI's perspective, Wikipedia's perspective, the mainstream perspective, the one that you'll see in all the textbooks, it reflects a very narrow bias. It reflects the interests of the central government and its two main compartments. The way they split the information, it's pretty much everywhere. Like there's no deviation here. There's no country standing up against the fake news. No, they all play along with it. I mean, look at the space program, how everyone is participating in the same thing. So I'm saying this is a global thing. COVID reveals it's a global thing. That's some that's some serious integration, conglomeration. We're talking about a one world agreed upon version. I mean, this is like synchronization. It's the hive mind. This has got to be like 2020 has to be like one of their greatest achievements because and it's also intriguing how you have this internal diversity, but it actually doesn't matter because it's all contained in the same parameters. Vip John says, I believe the governments are connected. Everyone worldwide goes along with the big psyops like 9/11. Yes. But they offer you these guardrails. Like there's one that it's kind of popular now. Joe Rogan pushes it. He says, well, we had to fake the moon landing to trick the Russians. And so that saves face. That was the theme in Fly Me to the Moon with the fake mission called Artemis. Artemis. They said they had this rationale for faking it. But if faking it to win the space race explains it for them, well then how do they explain the subsequent missions? So it kind of doesn't make sense. But instead of saying moon landings are fake, they'll say, oh, that first one was fake, just because we had to win in the space race. That's a typical guardrail conspiracy theory. And that's all you hear from. Bart Sabrell was talking to Candace Owens, guardrailer. He was on Piers Morgan, guardrailer. They never go far enough. And I realize now how impervious this system is to facts. They can handle it now. I mean, we had Jesse Ventura saying to Piers Morgan, yeah, the Butler, Pennsylvania was fake. Well, that's a fact. He suggested maybe Trump was bladed. Whether or not that's true doesn't matter, but you can put the truth out there. But if it's in their arena, it doesn't go anywhere. It can't. There was this supposed expert in security who commented that no security team would have let the target of an assassination pose for pictures. So he said that had to be fake. But then someone said, well, what about the shooter? And what about the fireman? And so he had no way to explain it. So his answer was, well, they probably just found some undesirable to kill as the patsy, and the fireman is probably killed by accident. I'm sorry, but that makes zero sense. It's incoherent. but they have no way to explain it. Vip John says, I can't stand Piers Morgan or Joe Rogan. Conspiracy Candace, they make my skin crawl, but that's the point. That is likely true. I've considered this before as well, that maybe they intentionally put people in front of these things that are going to be perceived as repulsive, or maybe just unattractive or annoying, so that outsiders don't want to look into it. So they actually are. It's sort of a way to maintain a certain level of unpopularity. Like, they don't want them to be attractive. They want to be repulsive to kind of push people back to the mainstream. It's like, oh, that alternative media looks a little sketchy, because that's a common thing. A lot of these characters do look sketchy. And we were talking yesterday or today about all these flat Earth channels that had sketchy people involved. Like, it's like, is that a big rug pull? You build a movement, and if it gets too much momentum, oh yeah, you can just leak a few mug shots and criminal backgrounds, and then you just destroyed them. Like the Epstein Island thing, right? You have like this theory of blackmailed politicians. So they have a lot of power, but should they ever get out of line, something can leak and they're done. Well, we've seen that pretty much for some reason. Seems to be a tactic employed here. What do you all think of Rep Luna? How weird is that? How weird is that person? I knew from day one that she was out there to handle the crazy, because they had like retired MTG. But Luna Lunatic is just too perfect. And there she is talking about interdimensionals and demons, and how the astronauts saw aliens on the moon. I mean, she's just out there, and she's the face of this thing. Doesn't it seem like a joke? Like the world stage names that we've covered before, where you have these names that seemingly imperfectly relate to the function the person serves. What do you call it? Uh, Nominative determinism. Well, that's more common than you think. I mean, you would think. It's like, okay, it's actually a thing. There's some relationship between their names and the roles that they play. So we have numerous examples of this, but it just seems like a joke. Rep Luna seems like a joke. And is this whole thing a joke? Vip John says soft disclosures on some things. Wait a minute. Oh, Ryler. Here's what I was looking for. I was just thinking about that congresswoman. She's extremely attractive. That's called marketing. Vip John said, yeah, well, she got her start in a MAGA calendar. So and that's kind of the thing too with Lauren Boebert, who's also saying some crazy stuff. You've got this like constant presence in MAGA. I mean, it was Boebert, MTG, now it's her. She changed her name to Luna in 2019. Interesting. See, okay, now let's say we're right. Let's say this is a quote world stage name, and that it pertained to her role as the designated lunatic, right? Okay, if that's the case, then doesn't it imply that she was going to do this or have a role in this, as in disclosure, back in 2019? Like, that's when she got the role. Like, your role as Congresswoman Luna is to be the face of Trump's big UFO reveal. And then you're going to help market the idea that aliens are, quote, interdimensionals and demons and fallen angels, to pander to the traditional worldview on the right with regard to the extraterrestrials. Like, this extraterrestrial xenophobia thing that you see on the right. Yeah, she helped bring that in. Vip John says, Could be an inside joke with them, and for us who are paying attention, it's like taunting. Right. I can kind of see that. Like, it does seem like a joke because of the idea that they can say stuff above the heads of the audience. It's like a secret language, and inside jokes are a big part of this whole thing. Some of them are more obvious than others, but we had a pretty big list, and in 2020 it seemed like a regular facet. And it's a another example here of what we're looking at is something like literature. You've got foreshadowing. You have these characters who borrow from archetypes. You have mythic themes. You have fictional universes, and so if you look at it in that context too, a lot of literary techniques should be expected. We're looking at the world stage, theater of Siwar. So nominative determinism, yeah, it's a big irony, ironic coincidences. It's all a big part of it. Oh, she was on Joe Rogan as well. Okay. Yeah, isn't he pretty close to all this stuff? Like talking to Charlie Sheen on the day Charlie Kirk gets killed about JFK and Oswald, and then Sheen joking about some time where he was sniped. I mean, you look into this thing, it's like, okay, this is insane. Joe Rogan is a popular podcaster, but he's also, like anyone at that level of popularity, seemingly a platform for psyop related content, concurrent programming, concurrent messaging. The Charlie Kirk thing is a big one. Like, if you don't know that one, it's basically Charlie Sheen releases Charlie because he's having this Netflix comeback on September 10th. And on that day, he's on Joe Rogan. And they're talking about his comeback. Meanwhile, it was called Charlie Kirk's America Comeback Tour. So you have two Charlies, two comebacks. So while Charlie 1 is at his comeback giving a speech, Charlie 2 is on Joe Rogan talking about the JFK assassination and how somebody threw something from a balcony and hit him in the head. And Joe Rogan laughed and said, "That was a great shot when you got shot, Charlie." And then they cut to a commercial and they're like, Charlie Kirk just got shot. I mean, why were they talking about JFK and Lee Harvey Oswald and Charlie Sheen getting shot on his comeback on that day that Kirk's on his comeback? You see what I mean? So you're like, okay, well, that's just a coincidence. Okay, well, Roger Stone had showed this email where Kirk had just messaged him and said, "Do you want to do a podcast about JFK?" And then the more we look into it, we're finding, wait, there's like JFK code all over this thing. Even in the analysis of the shooting itself, there was a ton of JFK overlap. And I'm saying these are not random. These are planted inferences you're meant to make because they tried to, I believe, create a JFK assassination for this generation out of Charlie. Like, this is a significant, historically significant psychological operation. Reller says Tim McVeigh was executed on 6/11 and was the head investigator for the June 12th Orlando shooting. Are you talking about the Pulse? What was the June 12th Orlando shooting? Now, this is interesting. This Luna character is interesting. That she just changed her name in 2019, and her name so perfectly fits with her role. In fact, today I actually tweeted at her, Rep Luna Tick. I put everything in caps but Tick. So I'm like, I don't know if I'm the first one to bring that up, but if you look at the comments, people are saying, what does she mean by interdimensional? And I'm suggesting she's the designated lunatic, but she's only a lunatic to the mainstream and the left. She's not a lunatic to the Tucker Carlson crowd, to the Candace Owens fans, and to the conspiracy theorists and ufologists. And I'm starting to think that the conspiracy crowd are just as numerous as the mainstream. Like, I didn't realize how mainstream this stuff is, but it's just as big a presence. It's not like it's a minor subset. Exactly, Vip John. Her role was planned as far back as 2019. So then that says that wait, so this disclosure was already in the works. When was Steven Spielberg's movie Age of Disclosure going into production? And remember, he did AI with Stanley Kubrick. So we haven't really even fully fleshed out all of the Steven Spielberg, but I think it's also worth mentioning here that Steven Spielberg's movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, is that the one? It had some theme that had to do with a train derailment. I remember there's some strong overlaps with the East Palestine, Ohio psyop, which involved the nuke, which tied into the movie on Netflix White Noise, which has the EMP and the nuke. So there's probably something to look into here. No, it wasn't on, I was not in her DMs. I was saying it out in the open. I'm all about transparency. I think that one of the good things about X is that even though these people that you comment at, they're a reply to, even though they're going to ignore you, like I don't know how many times I told Candace Owens, yeah, I know that Charlie Crook's alive, and you know too, and so does Erica. We know this is a big gig. Have a nice day. Like how many times have we let them know we know, and we also know that they can't acknowledge us? But I post it on their pages knowing they're not going to respond to me. I have no expectation of engagement, and the reason why is they can't engage with us. If they engage with media deconstructionists, with fakeologists, auto hoaxers, if they engage and direct any significant number of their like let's just say half of her subs look into this, it's going to do damage. It's going to create problems and raise inconvenient questions. So they completely steer people away from the off-world stage. That's their role anyway. The only reason she exists is to probably filter red pill into J pill, but also to guard rail conspiracy theories. And she's done not just the Kirk thing, she's done Apollo 11. She covers a lot of conspiracy theory topics badly. You got to hear her breakdown on Jack Parsons and her take on how NASA's pagan. Like it's not nuanced, it's word salady, it's incoherent, but it's all about co-opting that area of discourse and keeping it within their boundaries. These people are simply like goalies or guardrailers. They're strategically placed to steer discourse, nothing more. And so, yes, they ignore us. They can just ignore us. It's not futile because we don't really need their reaction. We're not dependent on it. It's not like we need their attention. I'm not even doing it other than uh, for our own record keeping purposes, and also because we are, communicating, intra think tank. Like, look, this person not responding is actually kind of an indicator here that we're outside of their boundaries. We're outside of their area of expertise. Vip John says, according to Farah, the film was produced in secrecy with minimum publicity over 3 years. Hmm. Planet Coda says, I think I just realized I hate Tucker. He's an obnoxious character. Well, he's also a character. He's fake grassroots. His fall from Fox News Grace was fake. He doesn't really believe in demons. I mean, I think he's a hilarious character, but what I find interesting about him is how he can deny things. Like he was interviewed by the New York Times or something recently, and he was like, "I never said Donald Trump was the Antichrist," and they're like, "Well, here, play. This is Tucker Carlson. Donald Trump's the Antichrist." Like they just blatantly call him out. And then in the last few days, people have been digging up comments where he's been more or less an apologist for cult leaders with underage girls and even kind of fetishizing underage girls. Like, he said some things over the years, and these things are resurfacing. Like, there's definitely an attempt to go after his character, but personally, I've always seen through him. I never bought into the whole Tucker Carlson thing. When the Batman movie came out, I remember thinking about this. He was being blamed for the Buffalo shooter at the what was it called? The grocery store? What's the name of that grocery store where that kid on who was on Discord went in there and shot the place up? But the media blamed it on Tucker Carlson. So then I'm watching the new Batman movie, and the Riddler's weapon is like what did he use? What kind of weapon did he use to kill the mayor? And they're like, the Tucker. I was like, what? It's a carpet tucker, like a carpenter's tool. But anyway, I just remember noticing here how they were demonizing Tucker, and then the word or the name Tucker became associated with this character called the Riddler. And the Riddler, in many ways, kind of mirrored Q, or the online provocateur. The the Tucker Carlson kind of fits into that category, the provocateur who's instigating people online. And of course, that was said of Tucker that yeah, he caused the shooter. Tucker sent the shooter. Was that King Super? No, King Supers was in Colorado. That was a great psyop. A bunch of people were going into this King Supers store in Colorado. It was like store number 33. There were 33 workers there. So this guy goes in while people are standing in line in the grocery store getting their COVID-19 shots, and instead they got AR-15 shots. That whole event was like any other thing. It's just a mass casualty sim. But it was on 322. And we had said, oh, it's a super day for a psyop because, the skull and bones reference. But that whole thing was just plastered with 33s. And when they brought the character out, there was just a number of flaws in their story. Oh, that was Tops. Actually, yeah, that was Tops, Ribo Nation. Now that I think about it, that's because this was also around the time of Uvalde. And when Uvalde happened, there were a couple of things that were notable here in the realm of predictive and concurrent programming. There was an NBC show called FBI, and they pulled the season finale because it was basically the plot of the Uvalde shooting. They put a warning label on the season premiere of Stranger Things because it opens up with a bunch of dead kids. But I remember at the time mentioning this because the Tops shooting had happened, Uvalde happened, and I'm watching Stranger Things season premiere, and the character Elle is playing with tops. She's spinning tops like telekinetically before she kills all the kids. Now, in the Tops shooting, he was recording it live and it looked like augmented virtual reality. And there's one person he shoots and it looks like a video game. It's like really bad graphics. And the guy's hat falls. I remember doing the frame by frames on this. The guy's hat falls on the floor, but it doesn't shrink in size as it falls away from the camera and hits the ground. It remains the same size. Like, so if you know what I'm talking about here is if you throw an object onto the ground further away from the camera, when it hits the ground, it should be visibly smaller. But this thing did not change size. It's kind of hilarious. It's a glitch. And then whenever some area looked very fake, coincidentally, it'd be pixelated like hell. So like, oh, it's just a bad internet connection. And I'm like, no, they're hiding the seams. All right, let's continue here. Riley says 2010s, the shooting psyop era. Yeah, that's back when the whole thing was they're gonna grab our guns. And that's not really a conversation anymore. But there was kind of an arc. It went from like Littleton to Parkland. And Parkland, they're like 17 years. of school shootings since Littleton. 17 people just got killed. They were really about the numbers and making it seem like this is the end of this particular script. But isn't it interesting that on the anniversary of the Littleton shooting just a few weeks ago, there was a guy on the Pyramid of the Moon where the World Cup's going to be. He was on the Pyramid of the Moon shooting people, total of 13, which is the number of Littleton. And he said he did so because he was inspired by Littleton. And they said he used AI to generate images of himself hanging out with the Littleton shooters. So it's a copycat killer. Well, the number 13, obviously 13 lunar months. So the 13 is associated with Pyramid of the Moon and with the Littleton shooters. At both of these events, you had 13s. This is all around the time of the Artemis mission as well. So the moon thing really stands out here. So I'm just kind of I'm trying to put the pieces here together with this particular shooting and Littleton and the moon reference, the 13s, and then the shooter was 27. Well, Littleton happened 27 years ago. And there are some other things in his story where he claims he had supernatural guidance. But what's the significance of 27 years? And then of course the 13s, the moon, and the location of the okay, so the location of where the World Cup's going to be. And there might be a connection here as well. And we brought this up in chat. I don't know. Let me see what you think. What's up, What's up, Vip John? Let's see. Ryler says there's a YouTuber who associates the decades with the 5 stages of grief. Pretty interesting. Well, what is the metascript? Is it a tragedy? Is it horror? Is it comedy? Or does it go back and forth? Because sometimes it's doomsday, sometimes it's clown world. When was the last time we called it clown world? Because things got really dark and serious with Minneapolis and Alex Pretty and Renee Good. And then the Epstein stuff, it got really dark, and then you got into the satanic panic stuff. Then we went into World War III, and then we went into Jim Carrey got killed and replaced. And now we're at alien disclosure slash nukes slash plague. So things kind of took a dark turn. So it's more horror. But I kind of feel like it's going to go back to clown world any day. But look, if we're going to be consistent in our analysis, we can't overlook the significance of Terminator 2 showing up in theaters this month. Because this throws in a 9/11 metascriptor. It throws in this image of the nuke that they're going to be plastering onto the zeitgeist here in a couple of weeks. And of course, James Cameron being a metascriptor, we can't just overlook the significance of who he is in this bigger context and what his movies represent. And then Terminator 2 contains not just 9/11 predictive programming, combining 9/11 with the nuke, but it also has Skynet, which is the evil AI takeover. So it's not an alien takeover, but it may as well be. But the proximity of it to Jurassic Liars' prophesied date for an event in Seattle should also be considered. Because I figured if they're going to pull it off, the nuke thing, it's going to have to happen in proximity to the Nolan's film, the Christopher Nolan's Odyssey. Because, of course, he did Oppenheimer. And so the nuke, the Poseidon, there's a lot of overlap here in the symbolism and subtext. And then we have a lot of movies with building up the idea of bunkers. I mentioned how Pluribus ends with a nuke. Begonia ends where they basically puncture the atmosphere. So that's kind of a reoccurring theme here as well. I'm trying to think if there's anything else about this Terminator movie worth considering. I mean, I watched James Cameron's Titanic the other night, not the whole movie, but the clip where the ship goes vertical, and it's like, wow, I'm watching 9/11. Like, it's actually kind of uh, the scene is pretty shocking. All these people falling into the water like that. So it's like, okay, this is interesting. This because we consider James Cameron's work to be predictive of 9/11. That's what we said about Terminator 2. And so for Titanic to seemingly foreshadow 9/11 like that, and then it splits in two, and then it sinks. And I'm like, wait, okay, fast forward to 9/11, where was James Cameron? Oh, he was at the site of the Titanic. So think of the connection here. It foreshadows 9/11, and on 9/11, he's at the Titanic's literal wreckage. And it goes much deeper. But what I'm pointing out here is that he is such a high level metascriptor Kubrick tier that the fact that he's got a movie being put on blast, something not only iconic, but one that contains well noted predictive programming for 9/11. And then to throw on the nuke, it sends the message to me the next 9/11 is happening. And at the end of Pluribus, when the main character says atom bomb, the last two words of the season, there's a 9/11 behind her on an ambulance. And it's when she decides that the alien invasion thing, the hive mind, she's like, no, this is a failed experiment. I'm going to nuke the world. Atom bomb. Riley says, are some of the wealthy people not in on the hoax? That's why they keep building bunkers. Yeah, I raised this question before because I have this theory that people like Elon Musk are in a position to exploit gullible, brainwashed rich people. And they probably have an underground market of bunkers, tickets to Mars, and probably even, well, I guess bunkers, tickets to Mars, and I don't know, maybe there has to be something else. Maybe even the idea of like digital immortality. You know, when you die, we'll put you into a cryogenic freeze like the guy in Vanilla Sky, and you'll live in a digital dream world until some point in the future, maybe in the year 2500, they'll have the tech to resurrect you. So, like, yeah, there's probably a huge market that's being exploited right now. And of course, we're not going to hear about it because it's not fair. You know, we're not rich. We don't get the bunkers and the tickets to Mars on the secret rockets in case things get really bad. Vip John says, remember the sub they made to the video game controller? Yeah, the Titan went down on the summer solstice. David Chase is another high level Kubrick metascriptor. What did he direct? Vip John says, it was to explore the Titanic wreckage. Oh, that's right. That's right. There was it was a trip to go. No. That was the one. Wasn't it going to that trench? Are you sure it was going to check out the Titanic? Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Because James Cameron had been down to the wreckage of the Titanic like 33 times. Interesting number there. He was down there filming something called Ghosts in the Abyss. And he was in a submersible called Challenger. But there was just so many layers of narrative, of subtext with these metascriptors. And one other point here is their movies will foreshadow multiple events. So Terminator 2 from this perspective has 9/11, but also the nuke, which hasn't happened yet. So I'm suggesting here that the timing of it really stands out. And last year at this time, they released that movie Final Destination Bloodline, which ties together 9/11 and some future disaster in Seattle. Oh, is that's the curator and head writer for The Sopranos. Right, and The Sopranos had the season finale where Tony Soprano, the mob boss, survives an assassination attempt and it only clips his ear, so he wears an ear bandage. There's a character named Rupert Thorne in Batman Caped Crusader that came out in the summer of 2024, around the time of Butler. And at the end of the season, Batman throws his bladed boomerang at Rupert Thorne and it clips the top right of his ear. And he says it's a warning. And then it ends the season. But The Sopranos has some levels of predictive programming and subtext that have been commented on earlier. Someone had clued me in on, and it may pertain to what happens next because it's the end of season one where the ear thing happens. And so then what happens in the rest of the program that may pertain to what's coming? And someone had broken down in the comments what they think it might be foreshadowing. But getting back to this Terminator 2 and why I think it's significant. So the character, the Terminator, well, the actor who plays it, the Schwarzenegger, is in Collateral Damage, which had billboards at Ground Zero. So Ground Zero happens, and you've got the Terminator overlooking Ground Zero. And that is sort of like Revelation 9/11, where it talks about the destroyer overlooking the abyss. And then where's James Cameron? He's filming Ghosts in the Abyss. So if you tie James Cameron to the Terminator, to Arnold Schwarzenegger, to Ground Zero, to 9/11, there's actually a pretty cohesive uh, set of connections here that are demonstrating a certain story. And the story's not quite over yet, but just pointing out here that the symbolism here is what we're getting at. So what is the Terminator, I would say, therefore represents this. It has this direct 9/11 correlation. So 9/11 and nuke. And so if you look at 9/11, it's just maybe just a code for this big like Laura Loomer said, we're going to have 9/11 times 10 coming up soon, thanks to Iran or something. Well, obviously we all know what that means. And we have seen a consistent buildup for a nuke on the West Coast. Seattle's pretty much been it. Although in the movie I think it's Los Angeles, but that's really beside the point. So if they're priming us for this event, then why wouldn't they just take this classic movie and put it out there? Because it's far more dramatic than Oppenheimer. And also, so it makes more sense too, because Oppenheimer didn't really do it as far as predictive programming. Because I said they're not going to do the nuke until after Oppenheimer. But Oppenheimer wasn't like that. It was about him. It was about him being accused of being a communist. It wasn't really about watching some city dramatically getting annihilated. But it did show that Christopher Nolan would likely be the person to direct the blast itself that they're going to sell us as real. And we talk about the numbers, like somebody's talking about 6/11. And in the Batman movie I alluded to earlier, the Riddler has his terrorists destroy a dam to flood Gotham on election day. So get this, the midterms 2022 slogan for the GOP was flood the polls. So there you have Batman movie comes out March 4th, 2022, and this bad guy floods the polls. And then the movie ends where Batman says, it's Wednesday, November the 6th. Gotham is underwater. I mean, 11/6, 6/11, 9/11. There's some sort of a consistency here. And when he says it, he's walking through the water holding a torch, so you're looking at his reflection. So it just has me thinking 6/11. And then, so the symbolism here with 9/11 and 6/11, as they relate to how they're presented to us, seems to imply that as 9/11 referenced external threats, 6/11 would be domestic, which is what happens in the Batman movie. Well, 6/11, of course, is McVeigh's death date. Trump was shot at 6/11. And where did Trump kick off his campaign? Waco, which is the Branch Davidian ATF standoff where Waco got, annihilated, and that is what radicalized Timothy McVeigh. So on 4/19, he retaliates with Oklahoma City, and then he's executed on 6/11. And of course, he was inspired by the Turner Diaries, which has predictive programming for 9/11. The author of the Turner Diaries was born on 9/11, 1933. McVeigh, of course, was 33 when he was executed on 6/11. Trump was actually shot at 6/11 in 33 seconds. But what I'm pointing out here is there's this buildup of this 6/11 thing that we've been talking about, where it seems to imply with McVeigh, for example. So McVeigh being 33 stands out as intriguing in this context because he was executed 90 days before 9/11, where 33-year-old Mohammed Atta leads the hijackers. So you have this kind of a parallel between this pair of 33-year-olds. So if you look at it from that perspective, the 6/11 seems to stand out, and then you add in Oppenheimer. The film itself was 11 miles long, weighs 600 pounds, 11.6. Oppenheimer's wearing a badge. It says K6, which is 11.6. So again, there's just as there was a lot of 9/11 code leading up to 9/11, there's been a lot of 6/11 and 11.6 code, and it's consistently referenced domestic terrorists. But Trump being shot at 6/11 seemed fascinating and foreshadowing of something. You know where he was last year on 6/11? He was at the Kennedy Center, now the Trump Kennedy Center, and he was posing in front of a bust of JFK. So JFK's head was right behind his, and he had his arms out. The lighting even made it look like stigmata, like his palms were red, like bloody. But again, on 6/11, there's this overlap with him and JFK, and that happens to be the exact minute he was shot. Now, this is kind of nuanced, but 84 days after he was shot, he goes back to Butler and he's hanging out there with Elon Musk, if you remember. And at 6/11, they had a moment of silence for the firemen. In fact, if they didn't have a dead fireman, they couldn't have had that moment of silence because they wouldn't have done it for the shooter. But during that moment of silence, a male singer performs Ave Maria. Well, if you go back to the Batman movie, when Batman is banging on the plexiglass asking the Riddler, "What did you do? What did you do?" referencing the fact that he was bombing the dams. Do you know what the Riddler does? He starts singing Ave Maria. It's like, okay, that's weird. Because if you look at Thomas Crooks, he looks like the Riddler. Although the Riddler also has this weird resemblance to there's even this Bill Gates kind of look to him. But anyway, we were just we were doing breakdowns of the shooters and how they overlap with the Batman universe. Like the Joker characters that we see, like the Joker shooter in Aurora, or the Boston Bombers, Joker Sarnaff. So Boston bomber Joker Sarnaff had his death penalty reinstated on March 4th, 2022. So the day Batman's released, the Joker has his death penalty reinstated. And shortly after that event, after the movie comes out, you have Frank James shooting up the subway. And Frank James was known online as the Prophet of Doom. And he was basically like the Riddler, sending sort of threatening videos to the mayor. And, the Riddler kills the mayor. And why did the Riddler have beef with the mayor? Because he let the mentally ill fall through the cracks. So they bring up the mental illness thing. And of course, his weapon's the Tucker, which does tie into this. But why was Frank James, the Prophet of Doom who shot up the subway with 33 rounds, why was he antagonizing the mayor? Because he said he was an underserved mental patient. The city forgot about him. So he had the exact same gripe as the Riddler. I mean, there was a lot of this is a whole separate category. If you want to look at the psyops according to the or associated with the fictional universes that supply the predictive programming, that might reveal quite a lot. Yeah, Ryler, Tucker does laugh like the original Riddler. Vip John says, I don't believe much bombing really goes on at all. It's all wag the dog. Yeah, are you familiar with the London bombings? The subway thing? Where the BBC has a special about how the terrorists, Islamic terrorists are going to bomb the subways. And it's like twin towers, right? The twin tunnels. Well, there's this BBC thing about this bombing that could happen. Well, then the twin tunnels do get bombed. These two different tunnels are each bombed by terrorists. Well, it turns out that there were drills happening on that day in the exact tunnels for bombings. So it's like, wait, you have drills in two tunnels, four bombs, or for a bombing attack, and then a real terror attack occurs in each of these tunnels. So you have the predictive programming, and then you have the drills for the event. And at the time, I remember I heard about this from InfoWars, and they said, oh, it was a drill that went live. So for years, people would say, oh, they used the drills, and then if they can get away with it, they turn it into a real event. That was another guardrail. I mean, we haven't talked about this one because it hasn't been used in years. But one of the ways that the controlled opposition used to guardrail these conspiracy theories to keep it, quote, real is to say, instead of saying it's a false flag, they would say it was a drill that went live, which is an absurd proposition. Like, yeah, they're just doing a drill, but they decided, nah, let's go ahead and kill a bunch of kids. No, it doesn't work that way. It was a drill because the bombing was fake. It was foreshadowed on the BBC because that was predicted programming, getting people ready for a big fake event that they could use to advance a lot of agendas. You know, these are put in full view of the public so they can react to it because they need your reaction so they can sell you the solution. Yes, exactly, Vip John. They were cleared out. So if you're doing a drill somewhere, like a mass casualty sim, it's safe to say it's a closed movie set for the duration of the drill. These training exercises are basically movie sets and they perform and they close their set. The fact that there was a concurrent drill is generally a hoax indicator. And we consistently note this to be a pattern. Like when the AA flight hits the Black Hawk. Well, it was during a drill for a evacuation of VIPs during a national emergency involving nukes. So like, wait, they're doing a drill and then the helicopter and the plane crash? It's like drills are dangerous. It's like, no, you use the excuse of the drill so you have a closed movie set. When people question or when they ask, how did they possibly fake so many deaths? How would they inflate? How would they even get away with pulling off a fake thing of this scale in a densely populated area? Well, let's see. You got 30 years in the making, and you've got more than a dozen drills going on, like dozens of drills, with many simulations going on, many mass casualty simulations. But like on 9/11 in particular, there were so many drills for terror attacks that day. In fact, you can find examples of, various like pilots saying, "Yeah, we were doing a drill for terror attacks," and then they said it was real. Well, the only reason you would say that if you weren't in on it. But the fact is, there were so many drills going on that day for the exact scenario, which would imply that those areas were cleared, pre-cleared, closed sets. Ryler says only a military could organize these fake events so well. Military runs the show. Yeah, you could make the case that this mass psychological warfare is a military operation. I mean, these psyop is a military term. Plain Dakota says, I recall programming for Osama being a threat before 9/11 because my friend said he watched the show all about him before. Well, right before 9/11, George Carlin was doing this comedy tour. And it was like, I think it was called I Want to See Lots of People Die. And he made jokes about Osama bin Laden and about planes crashing into buildings. Vip John says, I live in New York, and some people I talked to sworn, convinced themselves they've seen the planes. Yeah, a lot of people will lie to attach themselves to these events because it gives them clout. It gives them sympathy. They get loosh out of it. It's a big feeding frenzy. Everybody wants some of the loosh, but they're all liars. I've talked to so many liars. They're like, they call in, don't say it's fake. Somebody like my best friend's cousin's dog walker has a pastor whose mailman is 6 degrees separated from that jumper that you said doesn't exist. How dare you? It's like, okay, if I believed every person who claims it, the death toll would be like 5,000. But when you ask them for the names, they're like, oh, I don't remember. Okay, so you're defending the honor of somebody whose name you don't even remember. Get out of here. Give me the initials. And then they're always like, oh, yeah, okay. Um, uh, BW. So I look up the initials, like that person doesn't exist on 9/11's database of dead people. So I've encountered a lot of people lying. I mean, I hate to name names, but Flat Earth Dave, Dearth, David Weiss used to call me after live streams and tell me, don't say nobody died. And then he told me that he lived in New York or nearby, and he told me he saw the planes hitting the buildings. Other people have actually recorded him saying so. He told me his best friend was an EMT who was dodging falling bodies and is so traumatized that he has to see a psychologist every day. So he tried to guilt trip me out of calling 9/11 fake by giving me faulty or fake eyewitness testimony. Ribo Nation says in T2, Arnold reveals the US military decided to go to a fully AI robotic and drone force. There's quite a lot to unpack there, and we barely got into the symbolism, like the Saturnian stuff. And I've done deep dives into it. And you notice you often see the Terminator represented as having one eye, like he's got a head wound, like the red eye. Ryler says the Lima played a major role in the elite, considering the numbers like 93 in the major psyops. Yeah, I thought so too. Like you had 93 is a big one, 77. Like Flight 77 flies for 77 minutes and then hits the 77-foot high building, the Pentagon. Pentagon has a pentagram. 77 is a very important key number in this thing. All the numbers on 9/11 seem to be very consistent with that. But yeah, 93, big one. Joe says, do you think most of these psyops that we see playing out are so they can eventually restrict information on the internet? No. I mean, it seems like the conspiracy theories are built into the system. They're not trying to get rid of them. They actually proliferate them. They need that separate compartment so they can triangulate the two factions. They're not censoring anybody. Like, oh, Joe Rogan got, I mean, not Joe Rogan, Alex Jones got sued and they took Infowars.com. It hasn't changed anything. He's still just as present as ever. There's no censorship. They already have everything on lockdown, and they just ignore those of us who say things that they don't. But what's more, I mean, I'm here online. Other people are saying these things, commenting about fake things. We're basically telling the truth. It doesn't matter. That's why I said we have to form our own third branch, because the truth doesn't matter if you're speaking from the world stage perspective. These facts get diluted, they drown. But I don't think they're using the restriction of information for mind control at this point. I think they're doing the information deluge. So instead of restricting and censoring, there's an information glut so overwhelming that nobody can parse it. Like, don't you kind of get the feeling that we never really get any closure on any one psyop before they move to the next one and the next one and the next one? Like, it never stops, and none of them get solved. No conspiracy theories ever get solved. How many times have they advertised World War III or Civil War? And then right when the whole thing's about to break, they move on to the next thing. So it's bred in circuses as a form of government. So you can only expect the entertainment to intensify. I don't think they're going to restrict. I think they're just going to add more and more layers of it. And it's not like they need to protect people from the truth because they can't hear it, they can't process it. And of course, by default, they've taken sides. Again, we're not dealing with an unwitting group of hostages who want to be liberated from a Truman Show that was imposed onto them through nonstop psychological warfare and propaganda PR stunts. No, they're actually like in the Matrix, and they will fight to defend it. So I think it's better to consider that people have already chosen their sides, their actions, their priorities, what they focus on, tells it all. Like if they're acting like a blue pill normie, just believe them. That's where they're at. If they're a red pill truther, if they're still in the truther cult, then just assume that's where they wish to be. Like you wouldn't go into a mosque or a church or a synod. You wouldn't go into any of these religious organizations and then say, "Hey, do you guys want to try something different?" Like you would never do such a thing. It wouldn't make any sense. I would never do such a thing. Like I really think we need to just respect people's free will in this whole thing, and this does require independent thinking or intellectual autonomy. So if you have to drag them in, they're not being autonomous. So to respect the autonomy of others, I think it's best to leave them where they are. The people that we're reaching out to are those who are already clawing their way out of the thing. And they're pretty obvious. Nobody dragged you here. This wasn't forced into your algorithm. You wouldn't even be here if you hadn't arrived at conclusions about events that are wildly divergent from what the mainstream alternative says. You wouldn't be here if you weren't irreverent regarding all these various influencers that we're supposed to idolize and trust. And also, you wouldn't be here if you were still a voter and overtly concerned with their fake issues. Like if you were a Antifa wokester, you wouldn't be here. If you're a if you were a J pill, you wouldn't be here, or you'd be on your way out. The red pill conspiracy theorist cultists are gonna have to be, I think, made aware of the fact that they are in fact in a cult. Because I mean, we have to describe things as they are. And we're not doing this for the cultists' benefit because cultists will just double down. We're doing it to reach those who are, again, coming to the conclusion that we arrived at already, that your perspective is being gaslit. It's not just that they don't pay attention. We're not looking for attention or validation. It's that your perspective is being systematically gaslit out of the equation. Your perceptions, your insights, your awareness doesn't matter here. Oh, we don't examine that stuff. You see, we're going to stick to our narratives and your facts that undermine our story. Yeah, we're not going to hear that. So what is that saying? It's Kafkaesque. It's saying you don't exist. Your perceptions don't matter. Don't believe your own perceptions. Believe what the Black Mirror tells you. Plain decode it says, I got here by searching the words flat earth on iTunes. Oh yeah, the flat earth report's how you got here. I see. Yeah, the flat earth report was a daily commentary on how the mainstream was responding to this fundamental challenge to their claims on cosmography, like the big picture. Because whether you think they're right or wrong, the idea that a lot of people would just stand up and say, "We think you've been lying to us our entire lives." Like it's a big middle finger challenge to the establishment media and the mind controllers in high places who exist. So whether or not they're right about that particular facet of this thing is immaterial. It was and is an act of uh, challenging the power structure. So you can mock the flat earthers, like they've got these career YouTubers who do nothing but mock the flat earthers. Like, well, what you're really doing is you're isolating one particular opinion of a group of people who've become reasonably skeptical about a media controlled by government that you are uncritically accepting as the arbiter of truth. I mean, these people are totally brainwashed mainstream news consumers, and they're just resorting to what? Ridiculing a group of people who are skeptical and then defining them by this one particular proposition, which honestly isn't the biggest thing. Like, I'm going to try to get on a call with Mark Sargent, and I want to talk about how, like, I'm curious about how he explains certain things, like meteors. Like, I have a lot of interest, questions about his model of the world as he sees it. But what we're getting at here is that we're dealing with a lot of incredulous people pretending to be skeptics. They're prejudiced. In other words, they're not even considering the information. They're prejudiced against it. And it's to their detriment. Keep your blindfolds on. We don't care. The fact of it is, news media being infused with fakery is not that challenging of a proposition. It's not that controversial. They're going to mock you and call you a nutcase, a tinfoil hatter for saying that media fakes the news. It's like, when have governments not lied? But moreover, we're demonstrating that the fakery is actually so entrenched because it has a purpose, which is far bigger than just manipulating the consensus opinion for that particular news cycle. No, we're talking about we exist or living through a prefabricated historic timeline written many years in advance. I mean, it sounds almost science fiction, and it's the only real conspiracy theory. Prove me wrong. Find me, and not only that, it's not a theory. It's a conspiracy. It's a successful conspiracy. The meta script, if you ask me, is bigger or at least more actionable than questioning the shape of the world or having a different model of the universe. Oh, Vip John, you found me through Fakeologist. Well, what do you think of my idea of networking with other content creators for my 24/7 audio feed? Because I think I could compile a lot of like one-on-one or basically guest appearances. Because I think we need to do some cross marketing. Because that is a way to pull together an audience of people who have a certain level of, again, I'm calling it situational awareness. Like, if you know about psyops, good. You know that's like it's obvious at this time. But if you're aware of psyops, good. At least you're not totally ignorant on the topic. But news bending, that's kind of cutting edge thinking here. News bending is looking at the long-term effects of cumulative, unchallenged fake news. But then history bending goes even deeper. And then concurrent programming, predictive programming, you add these other elements in. Now your situational awareness has you delineating between real and fake, past, present, and now you're aware of how the future is provably written in advance in large part. Ryler says you had some great talks with Lynn back in the day. Well, I was more or less trying to understand her viewpoint, but I disagree with all of her opinions. But that's okay. I mean, you can disagree, you can debate without being argumentative. Like, it's not personal. But she's wrong about everything. And she's a controlled opposition, uh, useful person. Like, I'm not going to say I don't think she's an agent or an operative, but I think she's clinging to a lot of alt media orthodoxies, not realizing that alt media is, in fact, mainstream territory. Always has been. And she's consistently pushed back against me on everything that I say regarding fakery, which is helpful because the pushback helped me to clarify my points. Like, what are the weak points in what we're advancing? What are they not finding compelling? So, another reason for the debating or discussing these things isn't to change one another's minds. I get that her opinions are settled. It's to understand where we're both at. And I think she's emblematic or symptomatic of a certain set of presuppositions that are built into that worldview. And ultimately, it comes down to uh, basically woke right politics. It all comes down to that. But her arguments, as with everyone, the arguments people raise against me help me to reverse engineer what they're saying and then find the flaws in what I'm advancing. Like at one point, I had made it very, I think, apparent that there's no real solid basis for believing in chemtrails. And then someone said to me, it wasn't Lynn, it was someone else. They said, well, aren't they just so bad that they wouldn't care and they would just do it? And I'm like, wait, who's the they? What is the argument here? They said, do you think that the bad guys are so nice they wouldn't do it? And that one had me perplexed for a few hours because their argument was, well, why wouldn't they? And I was like, well, what's the problem with that flaw? Like, what's their base assumption here? And it turns out it's called the appeal to motive fallacy. So if you assert that the other side has a certain motive, then you can make the claim, well, then this is consistent with their character. But the appeal to motive isn't evidence that the thing is real or being done. It's kind of slick. But no, I'm no longer interested in platforming or talking to mainstream people. I'm sorry, I'm not even platforming it. I'm not acting like their perspectives are valid to ours. I'm not going to sit there and be condescended to and ridiculed by someone who assumes that they have the intellectual high ground when they have zero situational awareness or they're just utterly dismissive. I mean, concurrent programming, if you look at it analytically, logically, objectively, it destroys all of the guardrail, false flag conspiracy theories because it reveals that all the fake events that we talk about don't involve real deaths. They don't kill people. And until you can let that go, you're not off the world stage. And if you're still trying to seek or get rise up some sort of sentiment that we ought to prosecute the people that did 9/11, you're operating under the assumption that 9/11 was actually a war crime and not just a a bad movie. And am I minimizing it? Yeah, absolutely. There's a big fundamental difference between 3,000 people dying and 0 dying, between a real terror attack and a complete fabricated event. And truthers are still treating that like it was a real attack, like they had real victims, and somebody really needs to pay for that. I'm like, it was large in scale and very impactful at the time, but it would be a mistake to overlook the systemic fakery and hyper focus on the big ones. She doesn't say nobody cries, nobody dies. I mean, maybe, but I don't know. But again, I don't really have any interest in debating people with settled opinions. That's done. She's also a hardcore militant anti-vaxxer, and that's never going to change either. Like anti-vaxxers, I don't care about people's opinions, but if you are an anti-vaxxer, it should be understood that you're actually taking a position that puts you in a box with all these other people. And we're not operating from within their frame of reference. Because again, just to reiterate this point, to take any of their perspectives is to stand upon decades of fakery as though you don't know it was all fake, or that you haven't calculated the implications for long-term systemic fakery on the present news cycles. It's cumulative. She's just set in her opinions. Riley says, "What happened to John LeBon?" I haven't really followed him lately, but it's just not a very profitable niche. And he was or he is, I think, more or less mainstream in his thinking regarding these events, but he's skeptical enough of mainstream to consider the conspiracy theories. I don't know if he's ever seriously considered what we talk about here. I think he sort of dismisses it as perhaps culty. I don't know. What was these? Oh, coincidences. We're looking at coincidences. And that's fine. And I understand where people are coming from. But there's going to be a time, maybe by the summer, where our great deconstruction project will be extensive enough to where you won't be able to rest on, oh, those are just coincidences, guys. And the sooner you confront that, the better. The sooner you confront the fact that we are looking at collusion, entrainment, systemic fakery, when you recognize that these aren't coincidences, the sooner you can come back to Realville and join us. You can unplug from a lot of the stuff, specifically the truther stuff, which is just toxic. Oh, his videos are pulled on YouTube. Yeah, I was wondering. I wonder if he got, because YouTube has not been kind. But yeah, again, I'm not really so sure where he's at with this stuff. But um, the predictive programming, concurrent programming versus synchromysticism debate was very important. And I'm glad that happened because for many years, people believed that the coincidences that we talk about are evidence that we're in a simulation. And that's a mainstream take. It's an unserious proposition. And we have, here at least, we have kind of arrived at the conclusion that that's an artificially injected proposition, that it's a talking point that was put into this equation. So anybody noticing patterns, instead of saying, oh, look, the government controls entertainment, instead they say, we're in a simulation, guys. Nothing is real. The news is fake and reality's fake. In other words, you're getting close to the truth, so they give you a schizo pill. And that term is actually quite popular now, where pattern noticers are calling themselves schizos. They're adopting the terminology of weaponized psychiatry, where, oh, if you don't agree with the state media, you're mentally ill and you're sick. So they're taking that label. And I'm like, no, noticing these patterns is not evidence that we're autistic or schizo. No, it's evidence that we're situationally aware, that we know what we're looking at, and we're not mystified by nonsense about simulations or revelation of the method. So we have come to the correct understanding of predictive concurrent programming as it relates to psyops, drills, fake historic events, and the long term purpose. We have the answers here. Nobody in Trutherville does. QOC is a gatekeeper, says Ryler. Well, there's only one way to know. I don't accuse people now because the truth will, it's like a strainer. Like there's going to be a process here where as what we do expands, and it will be confronted by the subscribers of every truther channel that we reach. And people can independently decide whether or not what we say or what we're discussing here is valid. And the people who don't, I'm not going to say convert, but the people who don't go off world stage won't have a lot to stand on the more we build our case, which again, we are correct, but we're building the body of work that will make this unignorable because it's already irrefutable, but we got to make it unignorable. So my advice would be join us now, um, and have a gradual, acclimation to this new environment, or you're going to have to just catch up later because it's not like this is going to go away. Ryler says Hidden America channel sus. He was shouted out by Kurt Metzger. His videos are too polished. And that autistic, yeah, that voice. The last time I listened to him, I said, okay, this voice is intentional. It's a character. They're trying to characterize the people that notice things as oddballs, as fringe. That these characters are like also safe. Like, oh, he's just safe, innocuous, idiosyncratic. It's like a nullification thing. It's like, okay, you guys just have your little quiet corner and we'll ignore you and you make your funny connections. But that's really not what we are. It's like they're kind of defanging it. It's like, no, actually, we're an existential threat to the establishment controlled media ecosystem. And we do represent the potential for a marketplace disruption that could be very costly to repair. And that's where I'm at. I mean, I'm curious as to when we start generating a little more momentum, I'm curious as to what they can do against this, considering that the information we traffic in is above the pay grade of all these propagandists, and it would actually undermine their entire platform's reason for existence. Because a lot of these platforms, a lot of these political positions are based on the presupposition that, oh, these terror attacks were real, these shootings were real, that thing was real. You pull the plug on that stuff, and what are they resting on? So I think this has a potential to be mildly disruptive, but I'm extremely curious to see what they do to stop it. How are they going to stop us? And there's another element to this as well, which is, and we experienced this back when we did the chat raids. There's something about, I'm not going to say mob psychology, but there is something to it about the group and the mob, the the team, and when a mob becomes self-aware, what I call the crack Gwyn. When the demographic becomes self-aware as a distinct subculture, movement, revolt, and then it recognizes that, hey, we've got beef with the establishment. we've got some problems with them. We want some accountability. What can we do to get that?" And I'm like, "Well, um, burn their stage down and then laugh and do as much damage as you can, because all they can do is initiate damage control, try to ignore it without, I mean, because this isn't like a regular group of conspiracy theorists where they can directly confront you. So I don't know. I think it presents an interesting problem, and I'm looking forward to creating that problem. And it won't be long now. I would say I have a business plan here. I think within 3 months we're going to see some accelerationism. So if you're here for the auto hoax accelerationism, this is the perfect time. If you like what we did with the chat raids, that was just kind of a foreshadowing for what we can do now. And I think it's going to be a lot more effective now since we're much more independent. We're operating outside of their little sheep pens. And all the people who are trying to survive in their sheep pens are kind of hamstrung. They don't have a lot of freedom of movement because they're on a leash. And we don't have a leash. This is the uncontrolled opposition. That's what we are. Everybody else, not naming names, but until they join us, you have to really look at them as controlled opposition. Like some of your friends might be controlled opposition. You might want to tell them. All right, well, battery's going to die. We'll continue this conversation tomorrow. I'm going to set up the other project I was working on, the 24/7 audio feed. But we'll be live tomorrow for Infinite Plane Saturn Day to take calls. Have a good evening.